Accounts of President Biden's foggy memory sparking intense backlash from the White House. But public scrutiny is growing amid series of gaffes by the president this week. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. So what is the White House's latest defense today against the special counsel's revelations?
Good evening to you, Steve. The White House today really tried to push back against those accounts about Biden's lapses in memory, calling those comments by special counsel not living in reality and unacceptable. And in addition to just giving a flat denial here, the White House also went on to accuse the special counsel Robert Hur, who's a Republican, of being influenced by GOP pressure, if not directly being motivated by political motivations. Watch.
The way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated.
Republicans in Congress and elsewhere have been attacking prosecutors. There is pressure to criticize and to make, statements that maybe otherwise you wouldn't make.
But on the other hand, the White House today also had to affirm the special counsel's conclusion in suggesting that Biden should not be prosecuted for his handling of classified documents. Meanwhile, the press secretary today also had to defend Biden's many gaffes over the past week, and here's just two of them from the past 2 days. Let's take a look.
I said I'm going to be a president for everybody, whether you live in a red state or a green state.
President of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate.
It does happen to many people, and I actually talked about one of your colleagues that I do it to all the time.
President Biden insisted in a late-night press conference on Thursday that his memory was fine, but a new NBC poll released this week shows that 3/4 of Americans think that Biden's age is a concern, and that includes half of Democrats. Back to you, Steve.
So, Iris, lawmakers from both sides have reacted to the Department of Justice special counsel report on President Biden's handling of these classified documents. The report has put the spotlight on the president's mental acuity, as we just saw there. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the pulse of what people think about the findings.
The Department of Justice Special Counsel report on President Joe Biden's handling of classified material has generated controversy, but not for the reasons one might think. Robert Hur, the special counsel for this investigation, included in his language, and I quote, that President Joe Biden was an elderly man with poor memory. NTD came to Washington Union Station to see what people had to say about the matter. Let's listen.
The quote was also that he's a nice elderly man with memory problems. I think it's time to let him go to the retirement home and let someone else try it out.
The only thing I can confirm is that Joe Biden is an elderly man. As to his mental state, I have not met the man or had any personal interactions with him where I feel competent to judge his mental state.
I do believe that he is a little too old to be making up rules for the rules that he's making that he won't be able to see out in his lifetime, I guess.
I mean, I think I probably side with a whole lot of folks in this country when I say I wish we had some other alternatives, right? On both sides of the aisle. But look, when I think about the alternative to Joe Biden, that's not a good solution for me.
The special counsel's report does not recommend any charges against President Biden, but the language in the report does raise questions about the president's mental acuity. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Senators are in for a long weekend on Capitol Hill as they move a foreign aid bill for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. And there will be strings attached to how that money is used. Following pressure from Senate Democrats, President Biden taking action with new guidance for the aid. He also directed criticism at Israel's military operations.
Senators are headed into a lengthy process for passing this $95 billion foreign aid package that allocates funds for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. Remember, this is the one without those border security provisions after all but 4 Republicans and 5 Democrats voted to tank that broader bill. Now, some Republicans, like Senator Rand Paul, for example, is vowing to slow the process to passing this foreign aid. He says he wants to force his colleagues to discuss why they think the Ukraine border is so much more important than the U.S. border. And following pressure from Senate Democrats, President Biden has added guardrails requiring those countries to give assurances that weapons won't be used to obstruct humanitarian assistance. This action comes after the president yesterday criticized Israel's war operations.
The conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top.
And even if this foreign aid package does pass the Senate, it's on shaky ground in the House. House Speaker Mike Johnson has emphasized multiple times that he wants to deal with foreign aid to these countries on a one-by-one basis. He has tried to, on multiple occasions, push standalone Israel aid. There's also growing opposition in the Republican-led House for aiding Ukraine. Speaker Johnson himself says he's not entirely opposed to giving more aid to Ukraine, but he does have reservations.
That's not been abandoned, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done with regard to what the answers that the White House needs to provide us.
So it's clear at this point that this mounting skepticism in the Republican-led House will further delay the process of getting this foreign aid to the president's desk. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
So does the House of Representatives have enough votes to pass a standalone funding package for Ukraine and Israel? One Florida congressman says yes. To discuss, we spoke with Congressman Darren Soto of Florida. Congressman Darren Soto, thank you so much for taking a moment.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Congressman, I want to get your thoughts. The Republicans are still licking their wounds from the border deal that fell through. Do you see any path forward, whether it be, say, H.R. 2, if the House Republicans were willing to have House Democrats come to the table and discuss their thoughts as well?
So first, we've seen an extraordinary collapse this week, a border security bill that they demanded, then they voted against, as well as a sham impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas going down. We Democrats remain open to good faith negotiations, but especially the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, we would love to see dreamers included in this deal. If they're not greedy, a lot could be done. We support funding for border security, and it can't just be the southern border. I represent Florida. The ports are also really important for us, but we have to have some positive immigration policies. Immigration judges are helpful, visas are helpful, but we really want to see dreamers and potentially farm workers be part of this package. And of course, we have a responsibility both to help Ukraine defend itself, the first invasion of Europe since World War II. We see Israel defending from a terrorist attack by Hamas, and even Taiwan is in a terrible situation. So whether it's protecting the homeland or democracy abroad, Democrats remain ready, willing, and able to compromise.
To your point, funding for Ukraine and Israel, one might say, was an innocent bystander to the collapse of that deal. The Senate appears to have advanced standalone funding for those two. Where do you see this going in the House?
Well, we've heard the Speaker talk about his opposition to Ukraine funding, as well as a lot of extreme MAGA Republicans. So I'm curious to see if they're going to put a floor vote out there, because there would be enough votes in the House between the Democrats and some Republicans to pass both Ukraine relief, Israel relief, as well as humanitarian relief for Gazans. And certainly we remain open to working on border issues with some positive immigration developments like Dreamers. So we're ready to work with them, but they have to work in good faith.
Congressman, you mentioned Taiwan. I think Taiwan sometimes gets lost in the mix between Israel and Ukraine. How important is it to make sure that Taiwan remains on the radar with the CCP kind of waiting in the wings, if you will?
Well, we have a close relationship with Taiwan, especially for microchip manufacturing. That's why we passed the CHIPS Act, because we have to increase our domestic production. They are still a really important partner of ours. In addition, they're a democracy. They've chosen to be a democracy, and we are doing our best to defend democracy both at home and abroad.
Lastly, the influx of migrants in our cities throughout the country, there's a lot of pressure right now. So what can the federal government do to mitigate the pressure in some of these cities which are already underserved?
Well, we could get Secretary Mayorkas from the Department of Homeland Security the funding he's requested. That's what this bill was all about, getting him funding for more Customs and Border Protection, more hearing officers to process asylum claims more efficiently. It takes resources. What is not helpful is a sham impeachment when the guy's just trying to do his job. He's asking Congress for money. We need to get it to him. And it's ports of entry. For Florida, we have folks who come in through the Keys and through Miami. And so we also need funding for those areas. And look, asylum is still the law of the land, and people have a right to be able to pursue asylum, but there needs to be a more orderly way of doing that. Also, it's really important to protect the president's parole power. He's designated parole for Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. A lot of these diasporas have a huge population in Central Florida and across Florida. They're also able to get work permits and work, so they're helping with our tight job market to help with the workforce shortages in small businesses. And we're uniting families in Florida. So whether it's that or TPS for Venezuelans, also a big one for Florida, we need to make sure we're protecting the progress we've made, but getting the resources to Secretary Mayorkas so we could protect the homeland.
Florida Congressman Darren Soto, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.